We have some really good, interesting information, and we're going to do a little bit more interactive today because I need some input from you guys about some things. I think maybe we should get started. I'm kind of waiting for my mom to get on board. Joyce, you there? You're still connecting on the audio. Okay.
You know, this is the first one that had a password.
Yeah, I started doing them a little bit differently, and I'm wondering if people are having a difficult time. I had to get some help because Carol can't do every week with us.
Uh-huh.
So,
well, you could sometimes like the other one doesn't have a password, so maybe you can set it up without a password.
I'm not setting up. That's the problem. My web designer from New York, Nuya, is doing it. Hopefully she's going to join because I want her to. Let me ask her if she can join actually, because I want her to.
That's weird. You had to put in a password today?
Yeah.
Did you not have to do that, Stephen?
I did not have to put in a password. No.
I didn't put a password in, Scott.
You didn't either. Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. I had to on.
That's interesting.
Just entering on the app.
Oh, if you went directly from Zoom instead of the link, you would have to put in a password.
Not always, but this time I did. Yeah.
Let's see who's with us. Okay.
Zoom has gotten so huge.
Yeah,
No
it's
wonder.
really been helpful. All right, so I guess what we'll do is, because we're at about 10 after the hour, and I just want to get things rolling a little bit. You know, the theme of today is what's going on with Mars retrograde. And the theme of Mars retrograde is we have to ask ourselves, have we been the spiritual warrior? So before we get started on that, I just want to kind of go over a couple of things and mention the mission statement. I've had the good fortune of being able to do readings with most of you guys here that are here with us. I'm trying to change the screen. Who is that beautiful young person? Oh, that's Johnny. Hi, Maria. Okay, cool. So to get started, the whole purpose of this conference, everybody can hear me, right? So everybody's kind of muted. If you want to jump in, just please, there's Pamela. If you want to jump in, just throw your hand up because I think I can see you all, or just unmute and jump in, okay? The whole purpose for this Zoom conference is to be able to, hey Pam, waving, is to be able to understand these two ancient sciences, astrology and Ayurveda, and be able to use them as ways to get the most abundance out of our lives. You know, astrology and Ayurveda were created over thousands and thousands of years by the ancient Vedics of India. Excuse me, I'm going to be admitting people as we go forward here, like entering Michael. And the Vedics left these wonderful tools for us as ways to create improvement in our lives and be able to find abundance in our lives. You know, without getting too caught up in this whole concept, we just kind of like to say that from a scientific end of things, the human body is made up of approximately 70 to 80% fluids. These fluids are in the form of cerebral spinal fluid, blood, lymphatic fluid, all the enzymes and proteins, but most importantly are neurotransmitters, the very things that conduct nerve activity from one dendrite of one nerve cell to the other dendrite of the other nerve cell. These neurotransmitters help to promote the way our body functions and the way our brains function. At the moment that we're born, the doctor smacks us on the rear end and we enter this consciousness and we imprint all the beautiful, heavily weighted gravitational pull from all the planets in the solar system and their ionic transfers, their ions and chemical ions from Mercury, from Venus, from Mars, from Jupiter. All these planets infuse their ionic chemical impressions onto our neurological systems, creating all our likes, our dislikes, and our tendencies. Now, remember, our modern medical model is based on the concepts that were laid out by Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the way we can look at ways our body is responding to these celestial occurrences and moderate them in order to find balance. So this is one of the things we're going to do today. And we're just going to jump right in now that we finished our little mission statement. We want to talk about what's going on and what the big news is this week. So the big news this week is the long-awaited Mars retrograde finally has arrived. I don't know if anybody is aware of this, but each week we talk about the big occurrences happening with Saturn and Pluto. But today, when a planet goes retrograde, Mars is going retrograde, it means that that planet moves into a position in the sky where it actually appears to be slowing down or actually moving backwards. Now, this takes its effect on us neurologically. Retrogrades generally reflect a time for us to go backwards and retrospect over the actions that have taken place within the energy of that planet. Now, a lot of this is going to be a little redundant because I want to drive home a couple of points and then I'm going to get your opinions on things. But in the case of Mars going retrograde, which has historically in astrology been considered to be a malefic planet, you know what a malefic planet means? Okay. A malefic planet means that it has not been beneficial. It has some degradational elements to us. Okay. Just because Mars has traditionally in astrology been considered to be malefic, just because it goes retrograde does not mean it becomes beneficial. I believe it represents a time, and we're getting so many different reactions and so many different impressions. Remember, astrology, and even to a degree Ayurveda, is somewhat subjective. So for me, what I believe it represents is this period of Mars retrograde is a time to go back over the actions that had to do with this intense, impulsive, aggressive Mars type action from our past. We're going to ask ourselves, today we're going to ask the question, are the aggressive actions that I did in the past, were they suitable for my own personal and spiritual growth, or were they detrimental? I don't look at retrogrades as being a bad thing. They're just a time for us to review the past. In fact, they can be quite enlightening and helpful for our own personal transformation. Many people think that when Mars goes retrograde, things become a little bit weird, or they slow down a little bit because Mars is the planet that usually gives us our powerful push. Now, because it's going retrograde and it appears to be slowing down, does that mean we don't have as much of a push? Definitely. We have much less of a push right now. In fact, I'm looking at a lot of faces right now that
Are they out of the oven?
A little bit more relaxed. I noticed that when Mars goes retrograde, we see a slowing of that intense push. But the best thing about what's going on with this particular Mars retrograde is the fact that it's traveling through the 12th house. Does anybody know what the 12th house is? The 12th house is the house ruled by Pisces. It's the house of spirituality. When Mars, which is going retrograde and is in the sign of Aries. Now we have somebody, Pamela Shore, she has 3 Aries in her chart. She's experiencing this to a large degree. Whoever that nice person is sitting next to you, Pamela, tell her to watch out because Mars is retrograde and Mars is in Aries right now. So Mars in Aries going retrograde means that it's a time to actually slow down. So you're actually going to be a little bit less impulsive and a little less aggressive. But the thing I like about this Mars in retrograde is that because it's going through that 12th house of spirituality, I believe that it's going to ask the great question of, have we been the spiritual warrior during these most recent transformations that have been going on? Mars retrograde, oh, so check this out. Mars retrograde happens every, I guess, 2 years. And the last time we had Mars in retrograde and in Aries was in the summer of 1941. Now, I don't think any of us are old enough to know what happened in December of 1941. But one thing we can definitely say about Mars retrograde is that if you attempt to undertake aggressive battling like Japan and Germany did, during a period like this, you're likely to end up on the losing end of the stick. It's why I think this is a very interesting time in regard to the presidential election. Why? Because I believe whoever undertakes a more aggressive approach during this campaigning period is likely to end up. I'm going to ask whoever that is to just go on mute because we're getting a little interference. So I believe that, you know, whoever is going to be going through, whoever ends up being more aggressive during this period of the presidential campaign is likely to actually sabotage themselves, because Mars during retrograde is a very weird time.
Sorry, I'm watching a
Wait,
work.
let me see that. Let me. So
It's
he
not-
doesn't. Distract him.
I'm just going to hang on for a second.
Oh.
No, you were your yes.
Thank you, Winnie. All right, so back to what we were saying. Excuse me, I got to take a little drink of water here. All right, so as we were saying, it's not really a time to be very aggressive. Also, this week you can't forget that Venus, the planet of love and money, is squaring Mars. Now, this can bring potential friction in our relationships. It often results in feeling like we're not able to get what it is that we want. So, because Venus and Mars are squaring at the same time as Mars is retrograde at the same time, we see a general tone of not being able to manifest the things that we want, feeling like we're running through quicksand, feeling like, there's a push, but yes, yet a pull back. I think the general tone for this week is basically not to push too hard because of these two configurations.
Okay.
All right. So
Yes.
moving right along, does anybody have any questions? Because I want to get to something I think is actually a little bit different for today's Zoom conference. Basically, I think it's pretty simple. Eddie, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Let me take you on. Let me put on mute.
No, get yourself off mute. You're on mute now. There you go.
Is that better? Is that better? Okay.
Yes.
So what you're saying is Mars, which is generally a push, is in retrograde. So it's feeling like that pushing is being resisted or
Slowing.
because this retrograde is also in Aries. It's what does that mean again?
It means that it's in its home aggressive sign. Aries is ruled by Mars, and when Mars and any aggressive planet is in its home sign, you can multiply its effect times 2. However, because it's doing a slowing move at the same time as it's in its aggressive sign, you've got this tug of war going on. Like, we're feeling this desire to move forward, but we're experiencing many speed bumps and many interferences. So that's the biggest thing this week. It's interesting, Eddie, last night I was talking to one of our clients, Drago. He's a scientist, and we were embarking on this conversation about how to get our prayers answered in the universe, and what is the universe telling us. During this very challenging time, there's been a lot of interference going on. It's really very simple. I have a Post-it on my refrigerator at home that basically says, what is God in the universe telling you? Well, it says, shut the F up and listen. Well, we can't hear anything the universe is saying while we have so much mind chatter. And we talk about that every week. We cannot tell what's being said while we're in a state of being distracted and where our brains are so overly active. And this has to do with how we use astrology and Ayurveda as the right timing to determine good periods to make a lot of actions. There are times throughout the year that astrology and celestial configurations push us to be active. And these things will actually result in us being more productive. Mm-hmm. And then there are earth biorhythms that take place that say it would be much better for us to be quiet and introspective. So right now with the Mars retrograde, it's a time to be retrospective and not so aggressive with our actions. Okay. We just simply want to ask ourselves now, have my actions in the past been supportive of spiritual behavior and the spiritual warrior? One of the things we're supposed to do, and I don't like to put shoulds on anything, but it's said by people who are better astrologers than I am, what do you do during a Mars retrograde? We know retrogrades generally is a time to look back. So now we want to simply ask ourselves, have the aggressive Mars type like actions from the past been supportive of spiritual growth and helping the universal collective, or have they been based in fear and ego? Well, today, I thought what we would do is something a little bit different. we really want to ask ourselves if we're making a difference for the whole global picture in the global community. The answer is yes, but how do we do this? Every week, people are saying, okay, I know that there's a lot of crazy shit happening in the universe. Excuse me. We have no minors with us today, so I can curse. We have a lot of configurations that are squares.
Oh, sorry.
We have a lot of squares and configurations that are creating a lot of confusion. What do we do? Okay, well, here's what one of the suggestions is by the Vedics. How do we change the universal collective? I believe it does not happen through actions that you would typically think by creating things like social uprising and protest. Those things may be necessary, but they're also very confusing and frustrating for not only the people who are receiving it, but even the people who are involved with it. You may think that these things need to take place for transformation, and maybe they do. But those things are our present physical actions. And right now, the universe is saying not to do those things. Right now, the universe is asking us to quietly look back at our past actions. So over the course of these recent months, we've been asking the question, what are we doing during these confusing times? We hear a lot about doing breath work. We hear a lot about doing meditation. We hear a lot about self-introspection and looking at ourselves. I say blah, 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 blah. Same stuff over and over and over again. Yes, we need to do those things. We need to meditate. We need to chill out. But what do we do to affect the collective? So today, I want to ask you all to join me on something that's really difficult. We've been doing the same thing week after week. Let's do something a little different, and let's do something a little more challenging. Let's go back and do what Mars retrograde is asking us to do. Have our actions in the past led us to a place of spiritual growth and affecting the whole? I'm going to give you an example. And remember, through today's process, transformation frequently comes through when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. So I'm going to ask ourselves, all of us, can you please be vulnerable with me? I'm going to be first, okay? Here's just a general example about looking back at our previous Mars actions. Remember, Mars is physical activity. Mars does not mean looking back and saying, oh, I undertook these mental recreations in my head. I created positive imagery. No, Mars doesn't do that. That's all Mercury. That's all Venus. That's all North Node. What we're asking is, what did you physically do in this last year to create transformation or to make choices based on ego and going backwards? Well, here's something that happened to me. Annabella and I did a lecture and a workshop about a year ago over here at Center for Inner Wisdom. Okay, right before we had to go on, we got terrible news. Somebody very, very close to us had just passed that was associated with the center. I looked, Annabella and I said, what do we do? Half the people here, there was 28 people there, half the people there know this person. Do we cancel? What do we do? Well, I have Mars in Virgo. Mars in Virgo is physical, precision, action, organization, and follow through no matter what. I always think about what my dad, Jack Keller, said. You know, he used to say, Scotty boy, whatever you think is difficult, chances are it's something you should be doing in order to separate yourself from the masses. If you're going to lead the masses, then be the leader that you think you should be. Each of us here is chosen to lead the masses into the next fifth and eighth dimensional vibration in order to lead the planet into the next phase. I know it. I've received messages for it. I feel each of your vibrations, and I know that we're here together for this reason. That means we're here to create leaders of one another. So I'm going to take the ball and put my you-know-what's on the chopping block first and tell you, when I had that lecture, and we got this terrible news, Annabella said, we can't do this. We have to cancel it immediately. I said, no, I want to do it because that's the right thing to do. Half these people don't even know this person who passed. They paid money for it. And I want to be the person who's organized and goes through what they say and says what they mean and all that good, authentic stuff. And then she said no because she said it wasn't honorable. And I said, but I want to follow through. We're going to do it. So we had a small battle. And then after, it was successful, but Annabella really struggled. I had more of an ability to sweep it behind because I come from that very strong pitta energy that says, under whatever circumstance, like a Marine, get it done. I don't know if this is necessary, but I've looked back recently at this, as I have in a number of other things, and I said to myself, okay, did you do this because you wanted to be authentic and serve the masses, like you keep saying to everybody? Or did you do this because your ego and your sense of self-preservation is based on this image? And I said, well, quite honestly, to share with all of you, and I'm changing the screen, I'm going to say it was both. Because I don't think that if I was in a place of complete pure love, I don't know for certain if I would have gone through with it, because I've looked back at it. I know for certain Annabella would not have done it. So Carol, who I spoke to earlier, had a wonderful example of this. And she's not here yet. She may be coming, I don't know. But what I want to ask, and this is just a small version of it, and I'm asking us to experience strength and self-empowerment through vulnerability, through a group of people who I know are vibrating in a place of wanting to change the earth and increase the mental power and the power of the collective. So I'll ask anybody, if you have the ability to look back at your physical actions over the last year, then since this pandemic started, have they all been based in desire to help the planet move forward, or have they been based on fear or ego, or both?
Good question.
Eddie, you're the first one because you got as big ones as I do.
Well, I'm like you. I'm a doer. I do, and I feel compelled to do. And there are times, as you just described, when doing isn't necessary. Just kind of sitting back and observing and being present is much more powerful. And what I'm feeling is in 2020, because everything is being contained and people aren't able to get around and get about, is that this is a perfect time to pay attention to Mercury retrograde and to allow
And Mars retrograde.
Yes, and allow yourself to just be present in whatever it comes up. You know, you're seeing the world wanting to be aggressively doing, and you feel your ego wanting to aggressively do. And,
yes.
I think that I'm just kind of in this place in September, where I'm being very aware of that energy, but I'm also retrograding too, because I'm deciding to slow down a bit and don't not put so much angst on me about completing and doing and because that completing and doing is all about my ego feeling I'm enough. It always is. So
let me ask you a question. Give us a specific time within the last year where you did something physically, because we're being asked to look at our physical actions, where you did something physically that may have been embedded and surrounded by ego and fear rather than support of the collective.
Wow.
And I know that's a question that I have for each and every one of you. Who wants to be courageous? I only gave a small example, but I could give a more, we want to look for, guys, you know what? I get asked the question each week, what do we do to change the collective? Is it going out and socially being involved with protests? No, it's very simple to look at. I mean, maybe it is. I'm not saying for certain, but we're each participants in the 8.2 billion of us that exist on the planet. We have to work on our own personal corrections. Right now, the universe is saying, look at your corrections in Mars. Remember, astrology is like an algebraic equation. X plus Y plus Z equals XYZ. So Mars retrograding is saying, go back and look at your physical actions over the last year and say, have they been surrounded and supported by the physical desire to support the collective, or have they happened out of a result of fear? So I want to welcome anybody to just jump in and tell us about something they did in the last year. Not something you thought about. That's Mercury. Not somebody you loved with feelings of love, but things that you actually physically did that either supported or didn't support your own spiritual growth. I know, it's a tough one. I told you I was going to challenge you all this week.
I'll volunteer.
Who's that?
Michael.
Hey,
Am I not on?
Delise.
Hello.
Hello, Michael.
So last year, almost to the date, I took 4 or 5 months off of work and just packed my car and drove.
Nice.
And I called it my freedom journey. And it was all about finding, well, I was trying to find an answer when I realized there was never really an answer, but understanding where my place is in the planet. So I just took the car and I drove, and I had only 2 points kind of reserved. It was, a family home in New York, and I went to Kripalu in Massachusetts. But everything in between and after was wherever I decided to stop is where I get a hotel room and stay, and I took my dog with me. So that was, and a lot of that was for both, if I have to answer that question. It was for myself, but it was also for how I can help the world. And I still don't know exactly what the answer is to that, but I'm on that path.
But Michael, don't you believe that helping the collective starts with you improving your own shortcomings and understanding your own self-growth?
Yeah, and I think that's what I had to free that's why I called it my freedom journey. I had to free myself in order to be able to take the pain and the suffering and everything I've been through and turn it into something that could help others. That's it.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing that. That's bold. And you're ballsy and brass, and that's what I love about you. We talked about that, and I agree with you. I believe that, at a certain level of our development, unless we're Mother Teresa, or unless we're Gandhi, or unless we're one of the ancient Vedics, who just everything is acted upon as a way of supporting the whole, because we know we're a reflection of the whole, it's very hard to get away from things that aren't at least somewhat self-serving, right? It's got to be challenging. Does anybody, hey Sharon, I see you just joined us. So we're talking about the fact that Mars is retrograde, and it's asking us to go back. Hi, sweetness. It's asking us to go back and look at some of the actions, not the thoughts, not the internalizations. That's all Mercury. But Mars is asking us to go back and look at some of our actions from the past now, and to see if they were supportive of our own spiritual growth. That's it in a nutshell. While you're sitting there thinking about it, I want to talk. My mom is with us, and on Wednesday we did a show that had a little bit to do. Mom, are you there?
Yes.
All right, we did a show. We did the radio show. Yeah, we did a radio show, and you found it very interesting that during this Mars retrograde, it's not exactly the best time for anybody to get really aggressive. And as Germany and Japan are evidenced by World War II, getting involved during a Mars retrograde in Aries will frequently backfire on you. And we're marveling at the fact that I have personally no political affiliation whatsoever. I'm a practicing Hindu. I think the whole thing's a big mishmash and a big joke. But in the span of what's going on, people actually do care about this election. We talked about the fact that whoever or whomever gets involved with a more aggressive campaign attack during the next month or two is likely to shoot themselves in the foot. Isn't that what we talked about on the radio on Wednesday, Ma?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts, well, I wanted to start, by the way, thank you for letting me join in. I wanted to ask you a question, though, first, before I answer your question, because this is kind of plaguing my consciousness. You always say that we shouldn't say the word shouldn't or should. And I'm just wondering if you can possibly explain why and what we should use instead and why it's detrimental.
Okay.
I also want...
Great question.
Okay.
So it's a great
that's
question.
My first question.
Okay, so to answer the first question, in behavioral cognitive therapy, we realize that every single bit of data that we ever encounter in our entire lives is imprinted in our cerebral cortex and stays with us for a good long time, okay? We also know that when we study Vedic philosophy, Yogananda was a genius at this, said every thought you ever have is translated into what's called a lifetron. A lifetron is a packet of energy that we as scientists know has power. You guys can move bridges, you can move mountains. I know it sounds cliche, but it all starts with a thought. And if the thought says, I'm going to go climb over this chair, then you say it starts with a thought. Next thing you know, the action perpetuates the thought and you climb over the chair. So we can prove that thoughts actually contain an energy. When we say should, it indicates that we are not doing something right. And when we indicate we're not doing something right, it disempowers us as not being the gods and goddesses that created everything at the beginning of time and the beginning of this experience. So we don't want to ever should on anybody, including ourselves. What we would like to do is say that the words have meaning and the words have power, and say, I would be better served, or I would be more powerful if I did this. Or if you absolutely have to lay judgment or an analysis on someone else, you might want to say, you know, I was thinking about it. Do you feel that you might get better results if you did this, rather than you should do this? That's the answer, Ma.
I don't know if I like that answer. It's not bad. But I think there are
Okay.
times that you really need the word should. I like it. I mean,
I know it's old
especially as
school,
a
though.
mother.
It's old
As
school
a
and you're
mother.
old school.
No, I'm not. I'm not old school. Don't say that. I feel there are times you can use the word, and it's a very, very good word. The word should is good because
Okay, so look, that's not what this today is about. Looking back at our physical actions to see if they supported our spiritual warrior growth. And I kind of want to stick to that, but it has to do with, yeah, it has. I only brought up the election because you seem to have had a little bit of a passing interest in what many people are asking me, what's going to happen with the election. Quite frankly, I believe that whoever undertakes a more aggressive approach is probably going to sabotage themselves. I think everybody's so fed up with the same old system that I don't believe during a Mars retrograde it suits anybody to be aggressive, and I think it's going to be self-sabotaging. That's really all I want to talk about as far as the political system goes. But I do want to get back to the theme of today's conference, which has to do with us really allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. What is real vulnerability? Well, it's sharing with people who you kind of know a little bit and say, this is an area where my actions did not support my highest growth. So I'm going to ask if anybody wants to share with us. I gave you an example of something that I did that I think ended up being a little bit ego-driven, a little bit Maya-based and physical-based, and I think it was all about saving face. And that was going through with a lecture and a workshop that I shouldn't have done when we got some really bad news. There's other versions of it where I was much worse than that, but I'm working up to those things. So does anybody want to share anything about some things that maybe they have done physically recently that may not have supported their highest? Come on, Maria. Unmute. Unmute. There you go.
I would say my most vulnerable time where I was doing something physically was probably during teaching yoga.
What happened?
Well, I'm very shy, and so it was a big deal for me to get up in front of a class
Yeah.
and teach a yoga class. And then I took it even a step further, and I taught Connected Warriors yoga class, which was for veterans of family members and friends of veterans. And I had to be careful because, people have PTSD, and I felt it was a big thing for me.
Well, as part of your
I
own,
don't get.
as part of your own personal,
It was big.
Yeah, as part of your own personal self-growth, did you do something you felt was supportive of your spiritual growth, or something that you felt was ego-based or fear-based, or was it a combination like Mike?
It was a combination. It was a
Tell us.
combination. Because I can see the ego in yoga. I
Yeah.
saw it a lot, I saw it in myself because we could become very insecure around, let's say, practitioners who were more advanced than I was.
Yeah. Now
Maybe I can't backbend as far as someone else can, or get into a handstand. I'm a slow yoga practitioner. I'm not a fast, powerful one. So I felt intimidation. That's my ego. That's my ego telling me, nobody wants to come to your class.
Now we're talking. That's
No one
awesome.
wants a slow class, And I saw the ego. I put people high up on pedestals in the yoga community who really didn't deserve to be on a high pedestal because they're just as human as I am. And I had my shit together more than they did. And I don't have my shit together.
Maria, I love you. I love you. That is exactly what we're talking about. You coming from a place of fear is ego. And so you're sharing with us something incredibly vulnerable. Do you know, when we sit there and we always think about the things we may wish we had done differently, you can mitigate the negative effects just by sharing it with others. Like what you just did, you've mitigated, you've let a lot of it go. Bravo. Somebody else has got to, really awesome. Somebody else has got to be willing to embarrass, or not embarrass, but like to make themselves invulnerable. I want to hear from somebody else. We want to hear from someone else. Uh-oh. All right, Danny. Come on, this is your opportunity. It's your
okay,
opportunity.
well, I'm really, I'm not I'm not here all the time, you guys, so nobody probably knows me, but I decided to do a master's thesis that encompassed society. When I found out, I was starting one path, and then I found out that a lot of my friends and coworkers were feeling very like unengaged, that they didn't have communities during COVID because of all of the, disassociation and not being next to people. So I decided to change my thesis to be something that would be more for society, to have leaders change the way that they are practicing and trying to bring about a community sense in the way that they promote and the way that they structure their business and the way that they mentor. So I circumvented doing what I wanted to do, study, for something that would be more relevant to helping people now in our society and with what's going on. So I think that was pretty selfless.
Okay. That's very, very good. And that's supportive of your own spiritual growth, because selflessness is a version of supporting and correcting the whole. I'm going to ask, we want to get into the juice a little bit, because with the juice and with the vulnerability comes incredible growth. Like, I'm in great appreciation and acknowledgement of what Maria just said, because she just shared with us something that came from a place of ego and possible fear. And there's very little difference between fear and ego, because ego is the fear that people are not going to realize how valuable we are. Same thing, same shit, it's just the opposite of love. But thank you for sharing how wonderful you've been.
I mean, I gave up stuff. Like I gave up eating flour and gluten, and I thought I was like, so smart all the time, and I knew what I was doing, and I gave up stuff when I was corrected. I don't think that that's really for everyone else's sake, more than it's just for like my own ego and my own selfishness. But
that's good. Good. Now we're getting into the juicy part of it. You gave up gluten and you are looking amazing, but you did it all because of your own self-vanity and fear and ego. I love it. Listen, there's growth in vulnerability. Jamie, is that you? I'm going to get to Jamie. I know she has something. You were about to walk away, Jamie. I want to hear from somebody else who can leave themselves vulnerable with ways that they acted in an ego fear-based way. I'm telling you, it's liberating. It's like a cleanse. It's like a juice cleanse for the spirit.
Okay,
All right, Sharon.
I'll take a stab out of here. I guess my because I do have a lot of fear. Fear holds me back from a lot, and in my mind I'm like, stop it, why are you doing this, you know better than this, and I still let it hold me back, and it's mostly from moving forward as an aromatherapist, because I think there's people out there, they know more than I do. Why is anybody going to want to listen to me? And I'll start that self-doubt, and then I'll stop and be like, no, you've studied, you worked, you just, I'll learn more. I keep learning. You learn every day and everything. And I'll tell myself that, but then I'm still kind of holding myself back. But I actually have made some strides this week where I'm just jumping in and just, taking control back to me, not letting that fear control what I'm doing. And we're making some strides with that business as well as a nonprofit my husband and I just started. We've been doing the work for years, but we just officially became a nonprofit. And I think part I have fear with that I'm going to do something wrong and get in trouble with the IRS. And I know better because I've been involved in nonprofits for many, many years. I worked for several. I worked for the Red Cross for many years and some other foundations. It's just my own self-doubt, I guess.
That's good. That's good. And that's hard to admit.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean this to turn this into a CODA meeting here, but I do want to recognize that the time we're in right now is asking us to do this. And the way to use astrology and Ayurveda is to know the timing. It's not a time to be acting. It's a time to be looking back and seeing if our actions were supportive of our spiritual growth, or were they supportive of fear? I know each and every one of you had actions that were based in wanting to self-improve and probably help the collective as well. But because we're in this Maya-based physical experience, it's very hard to escape actions that are based on our own ego-based value. Mm-hmm. So who wants to share an experience with us where they looked back at some of their actions? Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
I don't want to have to call on anyone because I don't want to embarrass you.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on the wrong page. Eddie, talk to us.
Yes. The other day, my daughter is home from California, and she asked me if she could help me with a project that I'm doing, a video project. And, because I'm vulnerable and I don't know I don't feel like I'm very confident in what I'm doing. And I'm always looking for help. She presented herself as an expert. So I was very appreciative. And she said, okay, well, I'll talk to the editor and I'll tell him what he should do and what edits he can make and how he can, enhance the video. So I was like, wow, that will really help me out. Well, I got home that evening and my daughter started telling me all the things that were wrong with my video and how I needed to just throw it away and start all over again.
Oh, that sucks.
Panicked because I had spent hours and days and hours just writing the copy and recording it and having it edited. And now she's coming in at the back end and telling me everything that's wrong with it. So I listened and I said, listen, thank you for all of your help. I said, but it was absolutely of no value. So I really think you should just back off and I really don't need your help anymore. Why did I say that?
That's it. That's the pivotal moment right there.
Yes. She flipped the fuck out. Excuse my language. And she started cursing at me and telling me what a bad father I was and how I was so insensitive. And I was just thinking like, she had promised to give me all this help. And now she's telling me all that I did wrong. And she's the one cursing me out. But what I did was I realized that I did trigger her by going after her and telling her how inadequate her help was. And I could have just unraveled it without having to trigger her too. So, what my retrospective perspective is that I let my woundedness, wanting to be perfect, have me attack my daughter and have her come back at me in a dramatic way at the dinner table.
This is excellent. This is exactly what I'm talking about. That's tough to share because we know we're flawed and we're sharing our flaws with other people right now. which I find very liberating on some level. But that's
Oh,
exactly
can
what
I
I'm talking
share
about. You're
one?
looking back at your actions. Looking back at your actions. Yeah, Ma. You have an action that you want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this has to do with vulnerability, right? Is that the basic question?
Yeah. We're
Sharing of
looking back at Mars.
vulnerability?
Yeah, we're looking back at Mars. Mars retrograde is asking us to look back at our actions to see if they supported spiritual growth or the ego.
Okay, I don't know if this counts, but I'll give it a shot anyway, okay?
Sure.
As you know, I came from a family that was extremely unhealthy, obese, sick,
Yep.
and a real disaster, no matter how you looked at it. It was just terrible. And they had no idea how to eat or how to live. So I was born into that, and I was very holistic, even as a baby. So I decided that I was going to really try to transform these people. And of course, it did not work because it was really awful. And it was a constant battle. And then when I got to be an adult, I decided somewhere along the line, Yogananda really started manifesting in Babaji. And even though we were Christian, I became a yogi. So I started doing a lot of yoga. And my family said, "You're insane." And it was a real battlefield, and it created tremendous vulnerability for me. Not only was I teaching a great deal of yoga at a time that nobody knew what it was, they thought it was like witchcraft. Okay, so there I am teaching yoga, and I have young children, and I'm taking them with me. And then the unthinkable happened. A television station said, "We want you to do yoga every day on television in a little bodysuit." And I said,
remember.
"Oh my God."
Yeah, I remember.
This is terrible. This is vulnerability to its 100th. I just want to stay home and hide. So there I was every day, and it was live television. So if I did a headstand and I fell out and killed myself, it would have been live, and there was no delay because it was very primitive. Okay, so there I was doing a headstand, a little bodysuit, and Scott is standing there watching. So I could, people are laughing at me, and my parents were in the audience. They said, "Okay, what are you going to do next? This is ridiculous." So I had nothing but extreme attacks on my vulnerability, but I did it anyway, and I do to this day. I still teach yoga. And yoga means union with God and with your higher self. So thank you, Scott. Thank you all very much for letting me share that. That's my extreme vulnerability and courage. So I get a gold star of some sort for that.
Well,
Sure.
now that you've identified the events where the actions took place, we ask ourselves the question, did those actions come from the desire for the ego to be satiated? Or did those actions come about because we wanted to help the collective move forward? Now, the purpose of today is to try to mitigate some of the energy that's been going on with this huge Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto transformation that we're going through. I told you, each one of you who's here and continues to be here each week has been selected by the universe as being participants in this movement from the third dimensional vibration into fifth and then eventually eighth in order to move the energy of the planet forward. But we can't do this until we do something ourselves. And that is to prostrate ourselves before one another, to allow our vulnerability to take place, because I'm telling you, it's liberating and there's great strength in vulnerability. And I laud and applaud each and every one of you who does this. And we don't want to do this for the purpose of ego. I want to hear your shared stories with us about areas where maybe you did not express the greatest growth. Remember, the greatest growth comes from vulnerability. So let me hear the areas of your lives where you acted, like Mars is asking us to look at our actions. What actions did we undertake that did not support the whole? I told you, I think I did that lecture out of complete obsession with accomplishment and ego. I'm gonna admit it. I mean, I like to believe that I did it because, you know, I want to affect the energy and move the vibration of the planet forward, but it's always a combination. You know how I can tell it's a combination? See that? Flesh, right? That's flesh. If I was doing it like Mother Teresa or Gandhi with no self involved whatsoever, we probably wouldn't be here. We'd be acting in a very saintly, etheric level. So let me hear from y'all. Who wants to share with us in ways that their physical actions did not support the whole? Or did? All
Can
right,
I?
Jen. Yeah, please.
Um, so I guess with this year alone, I mean, I honestly do feel like I am some sort of healer.
Without question.
But I do find that this year for me personally, it's more about like digging inward. So as I am healing inward, it's helping me heal outward as well. So I mean, I do see a connection with
Give us a specific event, Jess, where you may not have acted in good, a specific action. Because remember, Mars, the planet of action and aggressiveness. The key here is aggressiveness. And because it's retrograde, we're being asked by the universe to look back at our aggressiveness and when it didn't support the whole. I told the story about when, Eddie just talked about a story with his daughter. He was aggressively protecting his image in his daughter's eyes. All ego. Told the story about I going through with a lecture that I should have canceled, all because of ego. Michael told the story, so did Sharon. Come on, I know.
I apologize because I'm at work still, so I missed all of your stories.
That's okay. That's all right. Somebody else is going to share something with us if you don't have something.
Ego. Yeah, I don't know. I'll skip. Bye.
I'm gonna call on somebody, and I'm sorry to turn this into a classroom, but I gotta call on Adam. Adam, you know I love you, and you know you got more than enough in the tank on this one to share with us. When did our actions, even as simple as just cutting in front of some blind person and no one saw you, I don't care what it is liberating. It is transformative. It will thrust you guys into the 5th dimension in order to lead the planet if you do this. It's called look at ourselves, and look at ourselves in the most embarrassing, vulnerable way. This is the most growth is associated with this.
Well, I think that, taking over the responsibilities at the house where I live for my landlord, since he's too old to do anything, and the person who we thought was going to be doing that left their body. So here I am now, much more submissive and, afraid of interacting with men. I always feel at like on a lower tier because I'm gay.
Right.
So it's hard to tell workers, to do things when they don't really take you seriously as a man or as a person standing up for themselves. So, upon talking about it with Dr. Scott, and also just, the work that I've been doing physically with my body, with him, with chiropractic, and with the ways that, I feel who I am inside of my body, I was able to go out and talk from my power center and be very succinct and clear and get everything taken care of that needed to be taken care of. And it worked. Like, it was so easy. And I got so much respect after that.
You know what? I want to jump in for a second because...
How did it help the whole?
It did help the whole, because it sounds at first like it's self-serving, but it's not. Because we talked about this, and we're just going to share a little bit. We don't want to get too personal. But Adam, you did that as a matter of challenging yourself to do the most difficult thing, because you know that you're entering a phase where you're going to be leading people into a higher dimension of existence. Maria, can you mute your phone, hon? Can you mute? Sorry. No worries. Adam, I personally believe that was all done as a matter of self-improvement and part of your strengthening process in order to lead the masses. That's what I believe.
Well, thank you. Yeah, actually, it wasn't so much it was that I learned something about myself, that I could be whoever I want to be. And that if I feel like, you know, I was in the past, I talked to myself in a different way. And so, you know, I do speak to strangers. I think that, you know, there's a lot of homeless people in downtown and in this area, Fort Lauderdale. And I usually carry an extra bottle of water with me. And I just feel like telling those people that they are worthy of this water, and or of if I have a $5 bill or a single or something like that, you know, that to me it's not an ego thing as much as it fills my heart to be able to do just something tiny to help the whole, because they are part of the whole, just as like everybody else.
Right. Adam, that's nice. I know that a lot of the things we've been working on have to do with self-improvement. And once again, I just say to you, I applaud you, because the self-improvement is always coupled like a lattice with you for the desire to help the collective. I firmly believe that everything you do may look like it's through self-improvement for yourself is designed to help the collective. I really do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to get back to things that can really cause us to understand our version, our perspective of self-growth. I look at myself for doing certain things that are aggressive, that may have been self-serving. I shared one of them. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Any of their remember, Mars is the planet of action, and because it's retrograde, we're being asked to go back and look at our old actions, whether they're good, whether they're self-serving, whether they support the whole, whatever they are, we want to hear them. Rosa, is there anything you wanted to share with us?
Sure. If you like to listen to this, I'll share. You know, I had an accident a few months ago, right? Before that, it was before the coronavirus to come in. But before that, I was getting ready myself to have these little metaphysical business, because all my life I've been studying metaphysics and alternative medicine. So I thought that was the time for me to start to do it. So at the same time, I had just come back from Brazil. So I started a new job, and I said, well, I'm starting my new job. I have, I'm going to be, financially safe, so I can do my spiritual work. So I started. I made up my flyers. I made up my cards, and I went with this lady to start to do these, the healings. And also I had another place in Boca, also to do the healings. So I started the whole thing, right?
Right.
I believe there might have been some fear or something, because when I was leaving my job, I left my job, I was stopped at the light, and that's when somebody hit me really hard. I ended up in the hospital, and then after that, everything stopped. The only thing that I started that stopped working was my treatment with Dr. Scott. For me, I couldn't understand. I said, why this happened? Because I thought I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do. All my life, I thought that I was supposed to do this. But somehow, I guess I stopped myself, or the universe stopped me. I have no clue. Somebody, I have been asking all over the place, but I had gotten a real, answer to it. So now what happened, everything went back, went really retrograde. Everything went retrograde. So I tried to start all over again. But today, it was nice because I used to do hypnotherapy. and somebody asked me to do hypnosis and regression. And today I had somebody that came and we did the regression, and it was successful. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. So that's it. That's my story.
So I want to ask everybody, thank you, Rosa. I want to ask you, I'm going to make it a little bit more bold here. Are there any actions over the last 7 months since this little, well, I guess 8 months, that this very horrendous transformational period of Saturn and the planet of lessons, and is in conjunction in the same wedge with Pluto, the planet of transformation? Are there any actions that we can look back at that, I wouldn't like to use the word regret because they all serve a purpose for our own growth, but there are any actions that we can look back at, we say we wish we didn't do? I do. And it has to do with my own personal Saturn. I'm going to ask somebody else to go if you can. We're really getting down to the nitty gritty here, guys. We're coming upon the end of this transformational period through this little autumn period into the winter. And now we're going to separate the mice from the men. Okay. I don't want to be too, proselytizing and saying we're going out as sheep among wolves, but it's time to separate the mice from the men, so to speak. And what are we going to really do to transform? Let's look at our own vulnerabilities. I look at my own Saturn. I have been way too connected to people from the past. I have called them. I've reached out to them, when in fact I should have let them go. It's part of my own Saturn correction. How does Scott help the whole? I look at my own personal correction, and that helps the whole. How did I look at Mars? Mars was a little obsessive compulsive about doing that lecture. There's other events too, but I'm just using that. I have my own reservations about making myself vulnerable too, but my Mars in Virgo wanted to push through with an event that I should have canceled out of respect and deference to someone who just passed, but my obsession with getting things done took over. Who knows an area where they could have looked back at some of their actions, they wish they could have taken them back, or at least can learn from them and wish they didn't do something maybe. That might be a better way to look at it. Michael, are you going to help us?
Yeah. I'm not going to say it's a total regret because I've learned a lot from it, is allowing people to bring out the ugly in me.
Yeah.
So I actually just posted today, or I sent it to a friend. It's a Deepak saying, I believe. What other people think of you is none of your business. So I just saw my responsiveness to, like, my mother, my family, their opinions, their judgments, their should haves, or you should.
Yeah.
My response being nasty didn't serve really any purpose. So that's the only regret. That's
good.
it.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we know we can be reactive, and nastiness doesn't do anything. Eddie did it. I did it. You did it. We all have a little bit of excessive pitta. So what happens now during a period of Mars being in an aggressive sign and can knock our pitta energy out of alignment, when in fact it's asking us to retrospect? We can neutralize on an Ayurvedic level by doing exactly that. By looking at the ways that we've knocked ourselves out of balance. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a text right now. Does anybody else want to share something? I think we're getting the hang of this now, because remember, through vulnerability comes growth. And it's not vulnerable to do this alone because there's no vulnerability there. But we do it with others because that's where vulnerability is. What is everybody going to think about us? Who gives a shit? It's time for the mice to be separated from the men. We got to save this planet. We got to only save this planet if we save ourselves first. Eddie, talk to us. Unmute. Thank you.
I am, my daughter has been home for the past 3 weeks because she had surgery, and her personality is so overwhelming. And having her at home, has been an adjustment. But I realized that I take it out on my wife.
Yeah.
I am snappy with her. I ask her, I talk about her daughter, which is my daughter too.
Did you blame her for having the daughter?
I blame her for spoiling my daughter. Even though my daughter's 35 years old, there's a lot more peace in our home when she's gone. So yesterday I called her and I apologized to her for the drama that my other daughter and I had about the editing. And I told her I apologized for ruining the dinner, and because all she had wanted to have was a nice dinner, and she prepared it very nicely, and it was just a beautiful intention. But I had an attitude. My daughter was hysterical, and I regret that now.
That's good. That's really good. Maria, you have to unmute if you're talking to us. You have to unmute. Thank you, Eddie.
I'll share something. I'll try to keep it short. And I guess almost every day I do something that I sort of regret. And, but you know, something that's pretty much like that maybe we can all relate to is just my relationship with, let's just say, my husband, my son, my dogs. You know, they're probably the main triggers. Like, they can really trigger me. And I have gotten overreactive just by maybe something that they said. You know, like it was just like something that they said. All of a sudden it triggers me, and it puts me into such a horrible trance.
Yeah.
I get into a pretty dark place.
Yeah.
And then I cut myself off from them. Because I don't want them to see me that way. I don't want them to see me crying or sad. And I go so deep in it. In my mind, my ego just like is so mean.
Maria, why don't you want
Really
them to
mean.
see you? Why don't you want them to see how sad you are? Where's that coming from?
I think it's coming from that. I think like just from like invalidation, that you're overreactive, you're hypersensitive, don't be so ridiculous. What's, you know, there's not, I didn't do anything.
Right.
This is you, you know, like I don't want them to see that, you know, because it's ugly.
That's really, boy, you're really good at this. I got to tell you.
Ugly. Because I don't want to beat around the bush anymore. You know,
don't you think Maria's really good at like being vulnerable? I think you are.
Yes.
I feel very vulnerable right now. You know, like I'm really sensitive to what's going on. I even asked, I think, is something going on with the planets? Like,
absolutely.
I can feel the pull that I want to go forward and I want to jump into something, but the retrograde is pulling me back. And I'm learning how to sit back and just really shut up.
Maria, let me ask you a question. Now that you've shared two very vulnerable situations, you shared two vulnerable things. How do you feel having done that with us?
I feel a little bit lighter, you know, like
cool.
Maybe like some of that churning that goes on in that solar plex area is slowing down, you know, because just lately I feel like all my chakras are locked up.
Yeah.
You know, like they have padlocks on them. There's a feeling of very low energy.
This is awesome.
This
is awesome. Yeah. So you're talking about, you know, Einstein said that all energy doesn't change form; it only changes forms, and it doesn't dissipate. It just goes to different places. And we know through cognitive behavioral therapy that if you don't say something that you're keeping in, it causes internal muscle contraction, acidosis of our bloodstream. It causes alkalization to go down, and it causes our immune system to be suppressed, and we produce cortisol. Yeah. All the things that we don't want for health, to get, you know, terrible diseases. But studies show that just by being able to talk about it and get it out takes away and mitigates a lot of the inflammatory response inside the body. So I am very impressed by you. It's hard. You're better than I am.
You know, and then all of a sudden something snaps me out of it. You know, and when I'm in that trance, I forget all the tools that I have in my box that have been given to me, that I know how to get myself out of that trance. Right. I know how to get myself out of there, because it is a trance. You're in an ego state and you don't even recognize yourself.
Right. This is awesome. Listen, before we break, I want to, Rosa, you going to add something? Did you? Okay. So before we break, I want to ask the people who haven't had a chance to share with us, like April or Violetta, Utrus, or even Jess, do you guys want to share anything, or is it tell us how you feel about some of what we've done today? We'd love to hear your voice. Utrus, are you there?
Yes.
How are you feeling about today's discussion, sweetie, about vulnerability and discussing our previous actions, whether they supported our spiritual growth?
I'm just taking in everything. I'm just.
Okay. Are you feeling okay, babe?
Yeah. I'll talk about it another time.
Gotcha. Hey, April, can you at least say hello to us?
Yes, and I was gonna echo what Maria said.
Please.
I find myself so raging over the stupidest. It's not stupid, but it is stupid. But the rage is stupid. The rage is stupid. How mad I get over what's not stupid is the rage. The level of, so I literally have to talk myself off a shelf with another friend because I wouldn't dare say it to my roommate because I get that mad over a towel. But I mean, yeah. So it's got to be not just us. It can't be just us. It's got to be the level of containment and everything that we're dealing with. Because
100%.
I'm feeling it too. Like yeah.
Absolutely. There's something I want to share astrologically as we get ready to, end today's meeting. The Mars retrograde, you guys have done great. I'm super impressed because I took a lot of mental gymnastics just to get to the point of sharing with you some of the ways that I've not always acted with the greatest concern over the collective, and ego is a very hard thing to talk about. But remember, when we have Mars retrograde happening at the same time as we still have this very large configuration of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, those three planets are the big MFers behind all of this. And those are the things that are causing us to transform into our highest version of ourselves. Mars retrograde is just a 2-month cycle where we get to say, okay, now I'm going to look at my actions. So that was great that we did this, and we may do a little bit of it again next week if anyone has something else they want to share. Adam, did you want to say something with us?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, how long does that planetary alignment with Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn and Mars?
I think it's gonna culminate and start moving into a separation around December, but I have to defer to my mom because she has something she wants to add about the eclipse that she thinks is very powerful in December at the same time as I think those three dissipate. Is that true, Mom?
Yes, December 14th. And now the whole thing kind of reaches a peak of all what we're going through at that time. And our actions and our thoughts and our beliefs are so important. And what you're doing, Dr. Scott, is so significant because this is what's really needed. It's a time of healing and regeneration. So this whole nonsense will stop. And then on Christmas Eve, believe it or not, that's also very significant. The period between the eclipse on the 14th of December and Christmas Eve is the most significant time of your entire lives. What you're going to see then is possibly subtle or maybe overt, I'm not sure, but it will be very significant. So your Zoom is so important. People really need to hear about it, and they need to hear your message. So thank you, Dr. Scott. Thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being part of it. I mean, it's nothing without you guys. So I think maybe in retrospect, we want to just say that right now, I mean, I'm looking at your faces and I'm feeling your energies, and I see a lot of beautiful, gentle, sentient beings who are not really that aggressive. But I look at the pictures and I see myself as the most aggressive of all. And I want to remind myself first then, it's not the time to be aggressive. Remember, Germany and Japan, when the last time Mars went retrograde in Aries was in the spring of 1941. And of course, Japan went back and forth. Do we attack the US? Do we not attack the US? Well, in December of 1941, Hirohito gave the order, send out the kamikazes, send out the Zeros, send out the fighters. And as soon as he did, he said, oh my God. Of course, he said it in Japanese, so imagine I'm speaking Japanese. He said, oh my God, I think I made a terrible mistake. I think we may have awoken a sleeping giant. And then they got torn a new you-know-what. and they lost Nagasaki and Hiroshima as a result. It is not the time to be aggressive during the Mars retrograde. And remember, we were talking about the presidential election. I think it's very interesting, and think what you want about our current administration. I don't give two rats' asses, quite frankly. I think it's all going to play itself out on a spiritual level. But I thought it was very interesting that our current president, who has a very, I actually use him as an example in my astrology lectures as knowing a lot about astrology, or at least surrounding himself with a lot of people who know about astrology. And isn't it a miraculous thing that during, Adam and I were just talking about this last night, miraculous that instead of during the Republican convention, instead of him going hog wild like he usually does, he just read calmly for an hour and 15 minutes off the teleprompter, the most gentle version we've ever seen of this person. All the while, the other party was aggressive. And certain people, whose names I won't mention because I don't care who they are. They're just a bunch of children anyway, but got very aggressive. What are we going to do during Mars retrograde? What was if Hirohito could pull back the kamikazes, what would he have done? He would look back at his actions and say, you know, when you don't know what to do, you don't do anything. You just retrospect. And I think that part of our lesson today is to understand where is our area of self-growth. Well, it has to do with retrospecting and looking back over our actions from the past and trying not to repeat them, evaluating where we've experienced self-growth. So I want to say thank you. We did a little bit longer today. I think you guys are fantastic, and I appreciate you being with us. We've got a little bit of wind. Mom, put your phone on mute, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to say before we go, does anybody have any questions about what to do, how to behave, what's happening, or are we good? All right.
We're good.
Okay. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Please bring a friend on board who needs help. I look at a bunch of faces who are really doing fantastically well and understanding their own journeys, but there are people around us, as you all know, who are struggling tremendously. Help them, because that's part of our transformation. If it means bring them onto the Zoom, fine. If it means transfer the information over to them, if it means holding their hand like Adam, who goes and brings a bottle of water every time he goes out. I love you, Adam. You're just a spirit in service. Whatever it is, and see if you can bring them on board with the Zoom. Maybe it'll be entertaining for them enough to make a difference in their lives. Love you guys. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Mwah.
Have a nice
Bye.
weekend.
See you next week. Bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.